Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Berto Will is your host. We are going to have a great show, but where are my peeps? Where are my peeps? I don't see my peeps in the house. Anyhow, folks, I know folks are coming. The emails just automatically went out. I'm looking at it right now. Welcome, Lee Grant. Buenas tardes, mi hermano. Breach MCP is in the house. Welcome, Breach. She has a long thing for me to read. Melanie Keelan, directamente de Barcelona, Spain. Bruce Pollard says, peep, peep. How are you guys doing, my peeps? And of course, there is Michael Rudnan in the house. As usual, we're going to have a great show for you today, folks. As usual, not very well prepared today because, again, as soon as I get off this show today, I got to drive all the way to the other side of town because I'm giving a speech to the West Democratic Club. Is it the West Democratic Club? I don't remember the name of the club. I'm giving a speech at the club today. So therefore, I had to get all kind of stuff out of whack right now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's crazy. Lee Grant says, progressive will be belly aching about the Supreme Court affirmative action decision. Please, Don, please. Yes, I am going to talk about that. Michael, good to see you. Michael is in here waiting on deliveries. According to Bridge MCP, how about that, eh? And you notice she used that kind of I thought that the A thing was is that Irish? Hey, let's go out, eh? Is that Irish? I could swear that was Australian. But anyhow, we'll call it Irish for now. How about that, eh? Exonerated Central Park 5 member Yusef Salam poised to win New York City Council seat. Salam was one of 5 teenagers accused of raping a jogger and pressured into giving false confessions. They were exonerated in 2002 when DNA evidence linked another person to the crime. The teenagers sued New York City and the case was later settled. In the wake of the crime in 1989, former President Donald Trump took out a full-page ad that read, "Bring back the death penalty, bring back our police." On Tuesday night, Salam recalled to his supporters that what it was like to see ads at the time. There were large ads bought in 1989, a whisper for the state to kill us, Salam said. A whisper, in fact, into the darkness enclave of society for them to do to us what they had done to Emmett Till. For those of you who always takes the side of police, who always take the side of the DA, who somehow these guys are right. This guy that will become the councilman in New York, a coveted position in New York. And by the way, Bridges, I thought it was poetic justice that he is now in charge, will be one of the many in charge of those who would have convicted him and sent him to the death chambers. It would have been an innocent life. So whenever you guys are jumping on your high horse, we're absolutely sure this person confessed. Understand the social justice system, the criminal justice system in this country. There are 2 criminal justice systems in this country, and I think this is a great example of how it works. But it says A is Aussie, but Irish is pronounced I. Okay, so I'll say A for Aussie, I for Irish. So I imagine what you wanted to say was I about that. All right, got it, girl. Got it, girl. Anyway, we got a show for you today. The first topic of the show, as Brother Grant states, is going to be what they were talking about from the beginning from right after the Supreme Court case came out. And of course, you know, my choice of reading is usually the Supreme Court. I mean, it's usually Common Dreams. So here we go with the story at Common Dreams, and then I'll insert my commentary as we go. With Let Them Eat Cake, Obliviousness, Supreme Court ends affirmative action for colleges in a blistering dissent. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote that the court subverts the constitutional guarantee of equal protection by further entrenching racial inequality in education, the very foundation of our democratic government and pluralistic society. Continuing, we got the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday ruled in a pair of cases that affirmative action admission programs at 2 universities or unconstitutional, a decision excoriated in dissent by liberal justices, including Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote that the court's right-wing supermajority is entrenching inequality in education. The justices ruled that racially conscious admission programs at the University of North Carolina and Harvard University violate the U.S. Constitution Equal Protection Clause. The the vote was 6-3 in students for fair admission versus University of North Carolina and 6-2 in students for fair admission versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, from which Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson recused herself because she once served on one of Harvard's governing board. So you see, we have Ketanji Jackson doing the right thing. She removed herself from the judging because she had a conflict of interest having served on the board. We have the thugs in Alito and Clarence Thomas, who, in as much as they've received billions of dollars, or rather millions of dollars in services from people who whose cases came in front of them, they still went ahead and participated in those cases. It shows you what ethics is all about. Ethics is wrong-sided. Ethics on the right, non-existent. Ketanji Brown Jackson, she went ahead and excluded herself, recused herself, while Alito and the other guy, Clarence Thomas, didn't. The Harvard and UNC admission programs cannot be reconciled with the guarantees of the Equal Protection Clause. Both, again, I think that's the 14th Amendment, both programs lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints, Chief Justice Roberts wrote for the court right-wing supermajority in the Harvard ruling. We have never permitted admissions programs to work in that way, and we will not do so today. That's a lie. That has always been a lie. It has always been a lie. Admissions programs, even though not specifically stated, have tacitly been a race-based admission in this country. And that is what these programs were created to mitigate. Don't let anybody else fool you. These programs, absent these programs, admission to colleges have a huge race component. The only difference is that the race component that it has is to exclude those except from the majority race. That's not a question. That is a factual statement based on observed instances. California dropped this because the people voted that way. And what happened to the universities like Berkeley and so forth? Their minority population dropped by 40%. Are you going to tell me all those 40% of folks were incompetent when and were brought in because of their pigmentation? No, that's not what happened. We need to be honest in this country. Again, I don't play race cards, but race, because I don't believe in race, but I live in a racialized country. And in a racialized country, in as much as I know race is stupid, in as much as I know race has no validity, I still have to abide by the structures by which we are governed. And the reality is we are governed in a systemically racialized society. There is no doubt about it. And I'm going to go into a few more things, but I want to read what Neil Katyal had to say because it's important. He said, and here it is within the article, with Let Them Eat Cake obliviousness today, the majority polls the ripcord and anonymous color blindness for all by legal fiat. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. And having detached itself from the country's actual past and present experiences, the court has now been lured into interference with the crucial work that UNC and other institutions of higher learning are doing to solve America's real-world problems. And it's not only a problem in schools, it's a problem in employment, it's a problem in business. But unfortunately, too many choose not to see it. No one benefits from ignorance, and that's true. No one benefits from ignorance. Although formal race-linked legal barriers are gone, race still matters to the lived experience of all Americans in innumerable ways. And today's ruling makes things worse, not better. The best that can be said of the majority perspective is that it proceeds ostrich-like from the hope that preventing consideration of race will hate racism. But it is I got to open that one up because he wrote a rather long thing. But if that is the motivation, I repeat, if that is the motivation, and where is the rest of the thing? Okay, I guess they cut off the rest of his statement. But let me say this, okay? And in saying this, I'm going to plug something that I wrote. I have to. I'm a very positive person. And I love everybody, irrespective, love everybody. And I mean that from the depths of my heart. I've learned to love humanity from the depths of the heart. But in being the way I am, in being close with everybody that I hang with, irrespective of who they are, to some, they would use that as a template to say, look, everything is fine. Look at somebody like Egberto. He hangs with everybody. And everybody, he breaks bread with everybody. He hugs everybody. He has fun with everybody. Oh, racial problems are all gone, right? But that is not the lived experiences of most people, especially most people who are not known, right? I once I was talking about this topic at the radio station once, and there was a particular lady at the station. And the topic, when I told her what the topic was, she was like, but Egberto, I don't really think things are like that, So we sat down and I got real serious with her. And I said, I want to ask you a question and I don't want you to answer it immediately. You know me quite well. You're very comfortable around me. You can tell me anything. I can tell you anything. We can hug. We can do all these things. And you feel, you look, it's like nothing to you. We have fun together. And by the way, I meant to say that she's white. Okay. And it means, because we're friends, we're close, all that good stuff. But I want you to think back. Forget about it being me. Just picture it being this big black guy. I'm a tall guy, 6'1". Just think about it. And I want you to think back. Don't answer yet. I want you to think. If I came up behind you, if I just came up on you or whatever, do you think you would be a bit scared maybe? And what I'm asking of her is, because of the relationship we have, just be honest. Be honest with your thoughts. Be honest with how you think. Be honest with how you respond with other black men. That's not me. Just think. I want you to respond. And she thought for a minute. And a little embarrassingly, she said, if I really want to be honest, Egberto, I think maybe I would be taken aback some. I really do. And I said, and that is what I'm hoping people see. A lot of folks would hear say, oh, I've got a black friend or a Mexican friend, or I got me a Chinese friend or whatever, not realizing that that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are systemic, things that occur because of our past realities, because of our institutionalized realities. The reason why on TV, all the crime that you see on TV looks like black or Latino or any kind of BIPOC in the majority, but when you go to the court to see those people who are getting plea bargains, etc., it doesn't look like the folks you saw on TV. It's a room that is huge and filled with mostly people of the white persuasion getting plea deals for beating up their wives or stealing or doing all these things. The same things that you see on TV, mostly for BIPOCs. It's the same thing that happens in society at large. It's just not on TV. And you ask yourself, why not? It's systemic that we don't quite do a lot of that on TV. You'll see onesie, twosie, but when we look at crime, we want crime to look a certain way. When we look at education and who gets into colleges, etc., we are predisposed. We are predisposed to give the benefit of the doubt to others. Okay? We are predisposed. Restream is not working on YouTube and Twitch. Oh, really? I'm watching it on YouTube right now. I can see it on YouTube. Do a refresh. So what I'm trying to say, folks, is this. And by the way, I'm going to plug a book that I wrote. It's a online book that I wrote at Amazon. I wrote it called Tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean Man. Okay? Tribulations of an Afro-Caribbean Latino Man. And the reason why I wrote this book is exactly for the conversation that I had with my friend, the woman at the radio station. Because this smile and happy-go-lucky and loving everyone doesn't mean that I haven't gone through or don't go through what you hear Black folk, Latino folk speak about. And I wrote this book called Tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean Man. And the reason I wrote it is I have, at my age, I've developed hundreds of stories that have affected my businesses, that have affected my education, and that have affected my employment. And each of them were categorically race-based. From being in college, coming close to knocking out a teacher in my wild days, and somebody saving me, holding me back and saying, Berto, no, you're not going to do that. When a teacher in a fluid mechanics class, I get all the calculations right and I did the wrong answer by a silly mistake. Somebody did all the physics wrong and they got partial credit. I got 0. And my calculations were right, except the wrong answer. I messed up a decimal point or something. I don't remember what. And it's a constancy that happened in these classes at the University of Texas in Austin in the 80s. I've gone through all those things, right? So from admissions it is real, and it continues to be real. Not because your Black friend or your Mexican friend or these other friends don't talk about it, not because they don't say when it happens, mean these things don't happen. So when I see the Supreme Court comes back and say, we want a colorblind society, I live for that. I want that too. I want to go into a store and not know that there are eyes all over me. You know, I would make the best criminal, right? Because all I would do is go ahead and get one of my white brothers and say, hey, we're going to the store together. I'm going to walk this side of the store. You walk this side of the store. Start picking up everything expensive you can and stuff it in your pocket. They'll be busy following me. We could become, in fact, there are crime rings right now using that exact concept, using structural and institutional racism against the system by people getting together and doing those things. I know I'm off subject from the Supreme Court thing, but it all falls into the same domain, my brothers and sisters. It falls into the same domain. What this Supreme Court did will affect these schools. People may say, well, look, California did that long time ago in the admissions, and California is paying the price for what the people have voted for. If you ask people to say, you want universities to have a colorblind admission policy, that is an answer that everybody wants to say yes. Everybody wants to say yes. We want a colorblind admission policy to every university and college. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Number one, from standardized tests that are in effect, have biases towards, I always talked about this, right? You go take a standardized test and they're trying to see if you have your cognitive skills and relational skills. And they ask you something like cup, and they may put a cup, a saucer, and something else there, right? But you are from a home that you drink from a jug, and after you drink from a jug, they may have a paper towel in there. And your answer may be paper towel, not saucer when you see the cup. There are cultural things within these tests. And that was a lousy example I gave, I must admit that. But they're cultural. I've taken these tests. You know, my daughter, when she took her MCAT, right? She looked at me and said, Dad, I'm going to tell you something. For that MCAT test, it's a good thing that I grew up in this white environment because it actually likely increased my scores. Because look at this, Dad. And there were some questions in this, or multiple choices in this test that was culturally based. Culturally based. A lot of people find it, I don't understand what you're saying, but it was culturally based. And these things have material effects on the scores and who gets into a college for standardized tests, etc. But let me give you the biggest one. The biggest one. All these good universities have a program where, I forgot what it's called, where if your family went to that school, you also get preferential treatment to go to that school. I forgot what they called it. They have a special name for that. So you get a chance to go to that school. You get a bump because your parents went to that school. And, you know, these universities don't want to eliminate that. They don't want to eliminate that to open more spots for more people, which would open the pool, right? And nobody is going to the Supreme Court to say that is unconstitutional, right? They're not saying that by giving first tips to people whose parents went to this school, you can get in easier. They're not doing anything about that. But that in itself is racially based. Why is it racially based? Currently, it probably isn't. But if that school only accepted white people for a long time, or I had a preponderance of enrolling mostly white people, then the people who would be legacy, that's what it's called. The people who would have legacy points would mostly be whom again? White people. So therefore, generation after generation after generation, there will be a bias towards those who were the ones accepted into that institution. So when we talk about something being systemic, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. They say, oh, we want to keep legacy. Well, realize that keeping legacy enrollment, it keeps the legacy of what your institution was before affirmative action, or before everybody was allowed to go to your school. You have a permanent bias towards that group. But I wonder oftentimes why these arguments aren't made more forcefully, why these arguments aren't told, because I think most Americans are fair. I think most Americans are decent. I think most Americans want to be good. But when the argument isn't made in such a manner that makes them think critically, the mistakes are made. We get to elect racist Trumps and racist Supreme Court justices that in the process screws 6 people, 6 human beings on that Supreme Court, screwed over 50% of the population. So much for democracy. I repeat, 6 people on the Supreme Court screwed over 160 million Americans. And to be clear, it's likely more than 200 million Americans. And they've done it with the affirmative action for colleges. They've done it for women's reproductive rights. They've done it for for corporations being able, means saying money is speech and speech is money. These six people's authority has screwed more Americans than one can think about. How often do we see that? How often? Anyway, anybody wants to call in? I haven't gotten a call in a while. 281-823-7747. Anybody has some thoughts? 281-823-7747. I'd love to see if anybody wants to comment on anything that I've said there. Lee Grant, I would have expected you to give me a comment at least on the issue, because I know there are times that you don't want to believe some of these issues, but I think I've made it quite clear. The only thing I've heard from you is one says, let's say progressives will be aching about the SCOTUS decision. Don't take this opportunity to attack the judiciary. Of course, I'll take the opportunity to attack the judiciary, a pillar of our constitutional republic. It's no longer a pillar of the constitutional republic, and it's not because they voted against what we wanted. It's because they have become a political body. They have become a political body. And in the process, they are hurting people. That decision itself means there will be less BIPOCs coming out of Harvard. There will be less BIPOCs coming out of these universities. And just the name Harvard and all these things means X more dollars into some people's pockets, X more dollars and X more politicians. We have to remember that. Rusnet says, the MAGA majority of the Supreme Court were not elected. They are going to take us back to the dark ages. Brother Russ MCT, you're absolutely right. That is where we're heading to right now, back to the dark ages. Regresando a la oscuridad. Regresando a la oscuridad. That is going back to the darkness. It's a shame, but it's where we're at. Anybody want to call? 281-823-7747. I'm all ears. 281-823-7747. Would love to hear your voices. It looks like Bridge MCP is now a member of Twitch. I hope you like Twitch, Bridge MCP. Did you just create an account? I hadn't seen you there before, but you're there now. Anyhow, all right, the second subject is to play Donald Trump and his tapes, and what Donald Trump and his tapes mean to you, mean to us. Let's go ahead and listen to what this charlatan has to say. Lies are catching up with Donald Trump. They have him on tape. I mean, this was actually in the report, but hearing it on tape shows you how callous this guy is. But more importantly, it shows you that this was nothing but a child, a child in the White House who plays with things like their games. Can people not see this? Well, we know that there's nothing Trump can do that gets these people off. You kind of wonder about the psychology of a country, as Michael Steele said yesterday. This is something that's going to have to be investigated to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But listen to this. Listen to this. Not only the tape, but listen to some of the dialogue around the tape of Trump just showing off classified material as if it's a toy, wanting people to see, oh, look at what I got here. Shameful.
Weeks after Donald Trump pleaded not guilty to 37 felony counts related to his mishandling of classified documents, a damning new audio recording appears to be the clearest evidence yet of his alleged wrongdoing. In the leaked tape, which was obtained by CNN, the former president seems to show off what he admits is, quote, secret information regarding potential plans to attack Iran. According to a source, the conversation, which NBC News reported on earlier this month, took place at Trump's New Jersey Golf Club in August of 2021. There, the former president was reportedly meeting with writers who were helping his former White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, write a memoir. It is unclear who the other voices are on the recording, but the New York Times previously reported that one aide, Margot Martin, routinely taped interviews that Trump gave for books. Take a listen.
These are bad, sick people.
That was your coup, against you.
Well, it started right at the
like
beginning.
when Millie's talking about, you were going to try to do a coup. No, they were trying to do that before you even were sworn in. That's right. Trying to overthrow your election.
Well, with Millie, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him. Wow. We looked at him. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case,
Mm-hmm.
Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. Look at this. You attack, and
Hillary would print that out all the time,
she'd send it to Anthony Weiner, the pervert. By the way, isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
I was just saying, because we were talking about it. And he said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the papers.
It's pretty
This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to figure out
See, as president, I could have declassified.
Yeah.
Now I can't, but this is
now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so, here I have, and you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
it's
you.
incredible, right?
No,
hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
That recording was turned over to special counsel Jack Smith's office before the indictment of Donald Trump earlier this month. Reacting on social media last night, Trump attacked the Justice Department, claiming the tape somehow exonerates him of wrongdoing. NBC News has reached out to Trump for further comment, has not heard back from his team. So you sat and listened along with us there. What did you hear in there as a prosecutor?
That's right. I mean, he's at least waving it around. It's possible that, as he says to Brett Baird, was, just newspaper articles, but it doesn't really matter. I heard two things. First, I heard a complete blowing out of the water of his serial claims that he didn't know when he took things. It makes it clear that he knows there are rules here. And so his state of mind defense is really obliterated. The other thing I heard is just one more instance of his shifting defenses and his lies. We knew before that this was pivotal in the DOJ's decision to go in for the search warrant. And now we can see why. He's there waving this and saying, oh, here's a plan. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff gave me to attack Iran. At that point, the naysayers in DOJ were rolled and said, yes, we've got to go in and get this stuff.
Now, folks, this is a guy that stands a good chance of winning the presidency again. How can any leader in the world look at this guy and think, this is America, and he is deserving of being the president of that country? Well, I tell you what, if he were to become the president of the country again, as Michael Steele would allude to, it says more about us than it says about any party, than it says about Trump proper. It says more about us. It does say a lot about us, and you have to ask yourself one more time, how the hell did we elect this guy? How the hell can anybody take us seriously having elected somebody like this? It's interestingly, the rest of the world, they're waiting. They're waiting to see if we are going to repeat the same mistake again. Will we repeat the same mistake again? I would love to know. The conservatives are in the room right now. Are you guys? If Donald Trump is the heir apparent, the person running in your party, will you be electing Donald Trump again? Will you vote for Donald Trump again after all that he's done? Will you do that? I'm curious. Lee Grant, are you going to vote for Donald Trump again? I am honestly curious about that, and I would love a real answer. Anyhow, continuing with the program. Next subject at hand is the following. It's called, let me put it up on the screen. And by the way, I'm sorry that you're having some ear problems, Breach MCP. I have relatives in New York City. I don't know if it reached New York City. I know you are further up north, which is closer to Canada, but we'll see. Anyhow, next subject at hand is what again? The New York Times thinks workers suffering is a fair price for lower inflation. And this is another article that's based on a New York article from Common Dream. And I like to follow Common Dream because they do sort of what we do here at Politics Done Right. They take mainstream media many times and do the rightful analysis on it. Because like we always say, mainstream media, it's not that they're bad. It's just that their conclusion tends to be biased towards the plutocracy as well. So anyhow, good news, inflation is down, way down. Actually, it came down. It came in at 4% in May. Look, it's fallen 4% in May after peaking at just over 9% last summer. So it's down more than 50%. And I want you to recall that as Katie Porter, great congresswoman out of California, pointed out, 50% of inflation had nothing to do with supply chain. It had nothing to do with oil prices, nothing to do with any of that. It was solely corporate greed. Nothing more, nothing less. So therefore, if it's now 4%, who knows? We could really call ourselves at next to nothing in inflation, right? Anyhow, but don't get too excited. The New York Times is here to tell you that inflation is still a problem and more suffering for the working class is the solution. In a recent episode of the Times flagship podcast, The Daily, reporter Jenna Smilek argued that the Fed may have more work cut out for itself. Discussing why inflation's declined over the past year, she noted that it's mostly the result of supply issues resolving, but inflation remains above the Fed's 2% target. The part of inflation we're worried about now is the part that's not going to come down just because of a return to normal or because of luck, but the part that is going to require Fed policy. Oh, in other words, only the Fed can tame inflation. That's not true, but that's what she's saying, right? The standard of living has to decline. Huh? Wait. The standard of living has to decline? In the standard account, this is a key lesson of the last major period of high inflation for the United States faced, referred to as the Great Inflation. This era lasted from 1965 through 1982 and was finally brought to an end by Fed Chair Paul Volcker. And you remember what Paul Volcker did? Many of you are too young to remember that, but Paul Volcker zoomed up interest rates. I remember you could get mortgages at 19%. It was crazy. It made the people who are watching today would never believe what we went through. They would never believe what we went through back in those days, folks. But yes, that's what they did. Paul Volcker zoomed up interest rates like you'd not imagine. And it happened, and they kept on doing it, and they kept on doing it. But anyhow, so after assuming leadership of the Federal Reserve in 1979, Volcker announced the standard of living of the average American has to decline. He then proceeded to curb inflation through a brutal campaign against the working class. The U.S. has dealt with inflation differently in the past. During World War II, for instance, the government established the Office of Price Administration, which kept inflation in check through price controls. The Volcker approach was, of course, not the only available method for slowing price increases. As the progressive economist James Galbraith wrote recently, the U.S. has dealt with inflation differently in the past. During World War II, for instance, the government established the Office of Price Administration, which kept inflation in check through price controls. They were abolished in 1946 over protests and were later intellectually repudiated by economists and policymakers in favor of anti-government and pro-business ideology. As Galbraith puts it, from this, the entire charade of dumping responsibility for fighting inflation onto the central bank emerges. Spring in for that jacuzzi. The charade has continued for decades and has taken on renewed force in the last couple of years in the face of a high inflation, with little to no pushback from the corporate media. As current Fed Chair Jerome Powell prepared for a new war on inflation in the spring of 2022, for instance, the Times ran the headlines, "Powell admires Volcker. He may have to act like him." In other words, he may have to screw Americans once again. The piece of Smileck acknowledged that Fed campaign against inflation comes with risks, but it gave Volcker the final word. Maintaining confidence that a dollar will be able to buy tomorrow what it can today is a fundamental responsibility of monetary policy, Mr. Volcker wrote in 2018 memoir. Once lost, the consequence can be severe and stability hard to restore. BS. This is the think process from Milton Friedman, and these other capitalists who understands, they understand what they're doing. They're just saying we will always penalize our people for these things. But continuing, nowhere in the article was there any questioning of the idea that Fed should be at the helm of inflation fighting, that perhaps there is an alternative, one less painful for the majority of the country. Instead, the unspoken assumption is that this is all the Fed's responsibility, but that's an assumption, a highly ideological one, not an unbending nature of law of nature. Now, more than a year into Fed's campaign interest rates hikes, the Times is continuing with the reportorial line that the Fed must be the one to bring down inflation. According to this line of reasoning, inflation must be tamed at the cost of lower incomes. In other words, we give you people lower incomes. When we give you lower income, you have less money to spend. If you have less money to spend, the corporations will then be forced to bring the prices down, as opposed to simply eliminating that part and say, corporations, bring your prices down. It's a shame. Now, more than a year into the Fed campaign on interest rate hikes, the Times is continuing with the reportorial line that the Fed must be the one to bring it down. That is the main channel through which Fed policy interest rate hikes work. Smileck knows this. She may choose to obscure the class dynamics of this approach by talking about how rate hikes make people less comfortable springing from that jacuzzi bathtub and taking on a slightly higher rent than comes alongside it. You know the classic dilemma faced by low-wage workers who are disproportionately hit by the rate hikes. But at the end of the day, she does recognize that raising rates is about reducing people's income and thus their spending power. She just doesn't seem to have an issue with that. It is necessary. It's a necessary cost of the inflation fighting business. Not as good as 2%. And she wants everyone to know that if we are really serious about taming inflation, more could be required. Towards that end, the end of the podcast, Daily host Michael Badabato asked Smileck, "Inflation is down overall quite a bit," he said, "but we've learned that a lot of it, the stuff we feel the most, isn't truly the result of Fed policy, which is an important thing to understand. But Gina, if I am a consumer, how much do I really care about what caused the relative positive situation? Aren't I just pretty happy that all of this stuff has happened?" Smileck's response was, "Sure. And reasonably, you would be, but if you're a consumer, you also don't want to be a temporary. And 4% inflation is better than 9%, but it's still not as good as 2%, which is what it used to be. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind." Really? Interest rate hikes are the implied method of getting inflation back down to 2%, which is the Fed's target level. But other commentators have a very different take on what remains to be done to contain inflation. Gilbride, for one, sees historically high profit margins as the remaining issue that could keep inflation persistently elevated. The solution here, in his view, is strategic price controls. These would cap price charged by companies in particular industries, taking away the company's ability to keep pushing prices up at rapid speed and instead forcing them to focus as they should on quality and quantity. And that is, it's called price controls. Again, if it's not costing you more and you just want to increase the price so that your stockholders get more money, that is anti-people. It could easily be called anti-democratic. Just 2 paragraphs earlier, before that, she instead focused on the question on how much interest rates will have to be raised to unemployment to bring inflation down to 2% target. She ended the piece by quoting Jason Furman, a Harvard economist and former Obama advisor, who asserted, "People have been so crazily premature to keep declaring victory on inflation." Just 2 paragraphs earlier, Furman had suggested that unemployment, the Fed's favorite tool for lowering incomes and slowing price increases, might need to reach 10% to tame inflation. So we got to put a 10% pain on people. Get 10 million people unemployed, to be out of work, so that a loaf of bread will cost $2.55 next year rather than $2.60. You get it? You see it? You see how these people think? An arbitrary target. Even more glaring is that Smielek never once acknowledged in the podcast of the following article that the 2% target is largely arbitrary, not based on economic law, or that the Volcker tame inflation he stabilized at close to 4%, not 2%. Also not mentioned, very mainstream economists, including the Times' own Paul Krugman, have said recently that 2% is actually too low and that a bit more inflation would be preferable. One of the dirty little secrets of economic analysis is that even though inflation is universally regarded as a terrible scourge, efforts to measure its costs come up with embarrassingly small numbers. I'm not going to read the rest, but what I want to tell you is this. We continue to be screwed by our system. Whenever you hear inflation rates of the type that we're talking about here, whenever you hear these issues, remember where they're coming from. And remember why the mainstream media too often don't cover this subject as it should. Because it means the people who should pay the price are not the working class, but those who caused the problem in the first place. Look up inflation on my website, egbertowillies.com, because I do a lot of stories that cover inflation and point out in detail that inflation is not caused by the average American citizen. Inflation is something that's caused by our economic system and the fraud that it is. And people, even though Katie Porter will not come out and say that our economic system is a fraud, in fact, our economic system is a fraud. She can't say it, she's a politician, but she sure points out the fraudulent pieces of it quite often. Until we have enough people pointing out that our economic system is a fraud, until we have enough people pointing out the realities that it is here to simply move money away from the masses to the few, until we are honest about that reality, we will continue to have these problems. Simple numbers tell you the story. If the average investor, the investing class, the rich class, if their assets grow at 7%, their income grows at 7% plus per year, and the working class income and assets grow at between 0 to 2% per year. Notice what I said, between 0 to 2% per year. That means of a growing economy, the wealthy continues to get the most. And even though the entire economy is growing, the working class gets a smaller piece of it over and over again. If you understand derivatives, you understand what's going to happen in the long run. In the long run, they're assetless and they're nothing but indentured servants. And that is where we're heading. Indentured servitude. How many people, no matter what's happening, got to get up and work? Got to get up out of their beds. They got to go to work. They have COVID. They got to go to work. Everybody in the household has to work. The kids are latchkey kids because in order to keep the same standard of living, we have to have more people working. Wow. Wow. There is a better way. And I covered the better way in how to make America utopia, what it's going to require. It's going to require things like Medicare for all. It's going to require things like basic income. It's going to require a lot of these things that prevent that prevents the ship from tilting to one side. It is within our power to do that. But we first have to be educated. We secondly have to be critical thinkers. And thirdly, we have to be willing to buck our ideological false beliefs. Because that is what we have for decades after decades after decades. The false belief in what we really are. Anyhow, folks, we're getting close to the end of the program. And I just want to ask those of you who are on YouTube to please consider clicking that join button. Become a part of our PDR posse. It's very important to help sustain what we're doing here. If, as you all know, I'm heading off to Chicago for the Netroots Nation, the largest conglomeration of progressives. You can support that deed by going to politicsdoneright.com/NN3 sponsor. And I just went ahead and put that on. Well, let me put it onto the screen. Let's go ahead and get that onto the screen. I need to put that onto the screen. And it's onto the screen now. Again, you can support the program by going, or you can support my trip to Netroots Nation at that particular page, politicsdoneright.com. Oh, that's the wrong. I gave the wrong. That is one of the things, but I gave the wrong one. Take care, AVQ. Thank you for having been here. I need to give you another link. That was the wrong link that I put in there. Here is the link, the Netroots link, the NN3 link. This is the link right here. There you go. That's the link right there. politicsdoneright.com/NN23, politicsdoneright.com/NN23. And of course, you can support our program. Let's get this off of the screen. You can support our program, of course, by going to politicsdoneright.com/support. politicsdoneright.com/support. And I'm about to put that onto the screen, onto the chat right now. politicsdoneright.com/support. We can't do this without you. Thank you so kindly for being here. I'm going to get out of here a bit early because I got to go to a Democratic club and give a speech this afternoon. And I'll tell you about it tomorrow. Anyway, my name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.